The great thing about slicers in Power BI is that you can completely change the way they look. They could look like buttons, dropdown, list, range slider, timeline, and even a hierarchy slicer. Different options for different needs. I'm going to quickly show you how you can create these and when you could use them in your reports. We'll also cover some cool formatting options and important tips when it comes to syncing slicers across multiple pages. Let's start off with buttons. So over here in Power BI Desktop, I've disguised my slicer to look like buttons. Let me show you how you can easily set this up. So I'm going to go to a blank page. First thing we need to do is to add the slicer visual. Next thing, pick the category that you want to have inside the slicer. I'm going to go with product department. Default slicer type for text is a list. We're going to change these to look like buttons. Go to formatting options. Under slicer settings, change orientation from vertical to horizontal, and you immediately get buttons. Now these are responsive, so if you want vertical buttons, increase the height of your slicer. If you want horizontal buttons, increase the width of your slicer. By default, you're able to select multiple categories. So if I hold down Control, I can select all of these 4. If you don't want the users to be able to do that, if you want single select, there is a setting for that. Go to Selection and turn on single select. This way, no one can select multiple values. In terms of formatting, you have some limited options. For example, you can turn off the slicer header. If it's obvious what the slicer is, you don't need that. Under values, you can adjust the font of each button. You could adjust the border. So you could make it a bit thicker if you want. The border color. You can also adjust the background of the unselected categories. So for example, I could change these to yellow, but then it can become unclear what is selected and what isn't selected. So it's best just to go with a color that's similar to your background. Now, one thing you can also do is to turn off all of these borders, except leave either the top one or the bottom one on. Adjust the color, and you get a more minimalistic look. Now let's take a look at lists and hierarchy slicers. So I'm back on a blank page. We're going to add the slicer visual. Let's add department again to this. And by default, we get a list slicer. Again, you have multi-select on. If you want to turn it off, remember where that is. Under slicer settings, selection, you can turn on single select. And if you're dealing with lists, you're going to see radio buttons here instead of square boxes. If you happen to want to exclude something from your slicer, you can easily do that by right mouse clicking. So let's say I want to exclude creative arts to show up in my slicer. I'm going to right mouse click on it and select exclude, and it's gone. If I want to exclude electronics, right mouse click, exclude, it's gone. If I hover over the filter button here, I can see that there are filters on this visual. Where are these? Well, they're right here. If I open up my filter pane, we can see these filters were automatically applied here. If I don't want anyone to see that, I can hide it. Now when I go and hover over filters on this visual, it says there aren't any filters applied right now. I can easily turn this into a hierarchy slicer if I want, even if you don't have official hierarchies set up. So for example, I want to be able to drill into department and go to the next level. In this case, it happens to be the main product category. All I need to do is add this to the same slicer. So let's go back to our default view, and we're going to add main category and bring it underneath department. Now we're able to drill down into a product, and you can add multiple categories if you want to. Once you create a hierarchy, you also get some additional formatting options for that hierarchy. You can decide how much you want them to be indented. So if it's too much, you can bring it back here. Although that's going to be confusing, so it's better to have some easily identifiable indentation here. You can also decide on the type of icon you want to have on the side here. If you want to have plus or minus, or the caret icon. You can always switch between the type of slicer you have here. So if you click on this arrow, let's switch this to a dropdown and see what we get. The options we had applied before are there. We even get our slicer hierarchy in here. Next up, let's take a look at range sliders. Over here on this report page, I have total sales for the different products. I want to add a slicer for the product cost. This way, I can quickly take a look at products that are above $100. To do that, let's add our slicer visual and bring over our cost field. Now, because cost is a numeric field, by default, I get a range slider. Now I can define my range and my table automatically updates. Now you have the option of inputting these manually yourself as well, or changing your selection from here to only see values that are greater than or equal to. This way, the top part of the range is grayed out and you can define the bottom part of the range or less than or equal to. Last up, let's take a look at timeline slicers. I'm going to add another slicer to the same report. This time, I'm going to add a field from my calendar table, and the field has the data type, date. Now, the moment you do that, you get a slicer that's similar to our numeric slicer, except that you have the calendar picker available. So you can make your selections directly from here, or you can type them in if you want. Now, in case you happen to add a date and you don't get this view, so for example, if I added the date field instead, then automatically I get this hierarchy slicer. If I don't want that, I'm just going to remove the other fields. Now I just have date. Then I'm going to go to this arrow on the corner and switch my view to between. This automatically gives me the timeline slicer. Now I can either use the slider here to change my selection, or again, use the calendar picker to adjust my selection. Now, whenever you're dealing with dates, you also get some more options. Aside from before and after what we saw with our numeric slicer, we also can select a relative date or a relative time. So we could take a look at the last 200 days, weeks, months, and so on. Okay, so these are the different slicers, but before we wrap up, I want to give you one final tip. And that's how you can sync slicers across multiple pages. So for example, let's say on this page here, this is page 4, I want my table to be filtered based on the slicer selection that I make on page 2. So when I select a different department here, I want my table on page 4 to be filtered to that department. I don't need to add a separate slicer for department here. I can sync this to my original slicer. First thing you need to do is select your slicer, go to View, and then Sync Slicers. You can choose to sync the slicer with all pages or select specific pages. So this one here is on page 2. It's visible. There's a check mark here, so that's for visibility. And this column is for syncing. I want to sync this and page 4 with one another. Now take a look at this. I have office supplies selected. When I go to page 4, I get my office supplies, markers, index dividers, pen and pencil sets. When I change my selection to party and celebration, I get to see the products in party and celebration. Now, what was that visibility option? If you choose to place a check mark here, all you get is that slicer pop-up on this page as well. These were some quick Power BI tips. If you're interested to learn Power BI from scratch, I just released a course called Fast Track to Power BI. So make sure you check it out if you're interested in learning this important skill. Okay, so that wraps up our Power BI slicer tutorial. Which slicers do you use most in your reports? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have some tips and tricks for slicers, please do share with us in the comments. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Do like this video if you liked it. And do subscribe if you aren't subscribed yet. And I'm going to see you in the next video.